Hello folks, welcome to the channel. My name is Carlos and today we're looking at Traska's 38mm Summiteer in the pine green color. So this is Traska's 38mm Summiteer with the pine green dial. This is a watch that's really trying to emulate the vibes of vintage Rolex Explorers, while at the same time staying away from being an outright homage. Before we get much deeper into this review, I do want to thank the good folks over at Traska for letting me borrow this watch for the purpose of this review. After the review is over, this watch will be going back to the folks at Traska. I do not get to keep this watch, and everything you will be hearing in this video will be my unfiltered opinion. So Traska is a pretty interesting micro brand who I believe operates out of Florida, whose main mission is to give people all of the fun and awesomeness of wearing a vintage watch without the headaches. Basically, if you're somebody who wants to spend a lot of money on a vintage watch or you have a family heirloom, the reality is that these watches are not great for everyday activities, and the amount of awareness that is required to wear a vintage watch can pretty much wear you down and make the experience not so much fun at times. So Traska really sets out to make a watch that gives you all of the vibes and wearing experience of a really cool vintage watch without none of the headaches, by giving you basically a brand new modern watch that is going to be a tool watch, that is going to be one of those go anywhere, do anything type of watches. So with all that said, let's get into the fit and finish for this watch. The case is a Rolex Explorer vintage design type of case that features linear brushing on the top with polishing on the sides. The case features a signed screw down crown. The case, however, does not offer any crown protection, giving the case that overall sort of skin diver vintage look. And one of the highlights of this watch is going to be the super thin bezel that they put on this watch, which then allows Traska to put a very nice, very vintage sapphire double dome crystal, which along with all of the other visual cues built into the watch really tie those vintage vibes in a just amazing way. The matted pine green dial is another very nice detail on this watch, which has a bit of a sector dial look with this sort of center circle and this outer track in which then you will find all of the markers. One very interesting aspect of the markers is that they are completely made out of overlaid loom, which means that this watch has phenomenal loom. Being that the markers don't have any metal framings around there, I think this kind of dresses down the watch a little bit and definitely makes the watch a little bit more sporty and a little bit more tooly. On the outside of the dial, we see the gilded train track that allows us to in more detail track minutes and seconds. The hands on the Summiteer lay themselves to very quick readability of the time with their very contrasty sword style design, and they're somewhat flashy but also very cool gold coloring. At the 12 o'clock of the dial, we will see the Traska branding, and at the 6 o'clock of the dial, we will see the word automatic, both printed in gold to match all of the gilded accents of the watch face. As I mentioned earlier, the crystal on this watch is this absolutely fantastic top hat double dome sapphire crystal that is really nice and bubbly and really just nails down perfectly those vintage vibes that most people attracted to this brand are going to be looking for. Turning the watch around and looking at the backside of the watch, Traska has chosen to keep this watch very simple with just a solid screw down case back with no design, edging, or anything of the type. One of the features that is going to bring people to the Traska brand on a watch like this is going to be the bracelet. The Summiteer ships with an oyster style bracelet, which features brushing pretty much everywhere except for the sides. You will not find any bevels or extra details on this particular bracelet. One of the highlights of this bracelet is going to be that the middle link is independently articulated. So this bracelet is going to be a lot more flexible than most and is going to just sit very well on the wrist. Adjusting this bracelet is very easy as all of the pins are actually screws. However, Traska doesn't happen to ship a screwdriver that you can use with the watch, so you will have to get your own screwdriver. This particular bracelet does not feature any half links and it does not have any micro adjustment holes, but it does have a pretty practical on-the-fly adjustment mechanism to be able to extend the last link to give you some level of adjustability without without having to use tools. Another thing that people are going to like very much about this bracelet is the fact that this bracelet does taper down quite a bit, and that means that the clasp itself is going to be thinner than most. It's also important to add that the clasp itself is also very nicely finished with a lot of radial brushing, the Traska logo, and very nice double pushers that really keep the watch secure on your wrist. All right, well, with all of that said, let's get into the accuracy of this watch. The Traska Summiteer does feature a Miyota 9 series movement ticking at 4 Hertz. Doing the 6 position test on the time grapher, I did find the deviation of accuracy across positions to be pretty big, with the slowest position being crowned up at -9 seconds per day, and the fastest position being dialed down at 5 seconds per day, giving us an overall time difference of about 16 seconds from the slowest to the fastest position. However, when I averaged all of the time differences across all of these positions, we did have an average timekeeping across 6 positions of only plus 1.3 seconds per day. So I think that this does go to show how some of these Japanese Miyota movements can be very accurate when you average all of the positions, even if the overall tolerances across all positions are not nearly as tight as their Swiss counterparts. But with all of that said, I do think that this particular watch was a very good timekeeper, and it really goes to show just how far a good regulation can go, even if you don't have like a super high performing movement. As far as pricing goes, currently the retail price for the Traska Summiteer on the Traska website is $670. And to really put the pricing into consideration, I think that there's 2 watches that come to mind that one would have to compare to this to sort of see what the runner-ups are. So one of them would probably be the Seiko Baby Alpinists, which is a relatively new watch that is also a field watch and has a very similar sort of vibe. However, it's probably not going to have a bracelet that is nearly as nice, but you are going to get a slightly higher end movement with a higher power reserve. The other watch that is kind of in the similar price range that you would crush up this against would also probably be something like the Hamilton Khaki Field, which will also have a higher power reserve, but will probably not have as nice of a movement, being that it uses one of the lower grade Powermatics. Traska with this particular watch is going to be in a place that is very full of competition. I think that $600 to $1,000 price range is one that's very competitive, but I think that these are the things that Traska does well in this particular area. One, it's giving you something that is going to have very Rolex Explorer kind of vibes to it. So if that's what you're looking for, this watch is probably going to give you that, while the Hamilton and the Seiko are probably not going to do that. This particular watch does its case thinness and size really well. So that's another thing that while you might be able to get a similarly sized case, I think thickness might not necessarily be as nice as this particular watch. And it's also very possible that the bracelet on the Traska is something that people are going to find a little bit more exciting, as it does offer that toolless adjustment mechanism on the clasp, as well as it screws instead of pins for holding down the links. All right, so let's wrap this up by getting into likes and dislikes. So as far as likes, I think there's a lot to like about the Traska Summiteer. It is pretty clear to me that the folks over at Traska are lovers of vintage watches, and particularly vintage sports watches, because this particular watch really just oozes vintage in its form factor and its wearing. And I think that this is really going to be one of the places where this watch is really going to stand out. Just its overall design of case, crown, dial, bezel, as well as that beautiful dome crystal. It really just has a very classy design, and it's hard to walk away from that. People who gravitate towards Traska, I think that those are going to be the things that bring them to this particular brand, as well as the pricing. As far as dislikes for this watch, I think that there's really only one missed opportunity on this watch, and for me it was the fact that like that one sort of adjustable link, it's very rudimentary, and so it just kind of makes me question if I was not able to get a good fit simply by removing links, would I actually use the micro adjustment to get a better fit? Because if I use the micro adjustment and too much of that link hangs out, you can really see kind of how thin and sort of like stamped. It's kind of a stamped link. I don't know, it might not be, but it kind of looks that way. So I think that that's really kind of my missed opportunity. I think that this watch has so much potential and is such a great vibe that improving that particular link is something that would just make this offering phenomenal. With that said, that link's not necessarily a deal breaker for me. I was able to get a perfect fit of this watch on my 7.5-inch wrist just by removing some links, and I didn't have to use that micro adjustment. I don't know that it would really matter on the long term, because I don't know that I personally on my wrist would get a lot of use of the micro adjustment on this particular bracelet. So anyways, that's pretty much it for the review. I'm curious to know, what do you guys think about the Traska Summiteer? Are you guys feeling sort of like the vintage vibes? Is this a watch that you sort of gravitate to? Is this something that you like, this type of offerings? Is this something that you're kind of thinking about picking up? For you guys that are like really hardcore about the vintage aesthetics, they do make a 36mm version of this watch. I felt like that was a little too small for my wrist, but I'm curious, like, which one would you guys pick? Would you guys go 38 or really go vintage and go for a 36? And lastly, like, tell me some micro brands that you would like to see on the channel that maybe match the vintage vibes and have similar sort of price offering propositions as Traska. Leave me all your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. I love having conversations with you guys in the comments. And as usual, if you liked the video and you made it all the way to the end, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a like. All of those things really help the channel. But either way, thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. It's always a pleasure to make these videos for you guys. So hopefully I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. See you.